That is the president a few moments ago outside the White House talking about a number of issues. His meeting with the Fed chair yesterday, the prospect of a weaker dollar, Gaza, Macron, hostage deal potentially. But maybe most importantly, Megan Cassella, would be this notion about a deal with trade between the U.S. and the EU. He put it at 50-50 and maybe a little bit less.
Yes, Carl, that's what I thought was the biggest headline from here, too, given that we know talks with the EU are ongoing. They're talking very frequently every day and trying really hard to make that deal by August 1st. First, he said 50-50. Then he said it might be a little bit less than that. And he also used phrasing that I thought was very interesting. He said the EU might, quote, have to buy down their tariffs. And then he spoke about how much Japan is investing in the U.S., that $550 billion. That's what led them to that 15% tariff. So as we've been talking about this week, 15% seems like the floor, and it seems like it has to come with some level of investment. We haven't heard officials in Brussels yet talking about what that investment might look like, what they're willing to do. But the president seems to be saying here that's what he needs to see in order to reach some sort of a deal.
What stood out to me is that he didn't bash Powell. He did not call him a numbskull. He did not insult him. He did not go after the building costs. I mean, he said that we had a very good meeting. And on interest rates, he said Powell congratulated him and said it's the very strong economy. The country is doing very well, which actually all makes sense. But then he said maybe that'll lead him to lower interest rates next week, and I don't think that that's going to happen. But, Megan, maybe that visit actually softened things.
I think that's so interesting. It definitely seemed like it. Even yesterday, as the visit was ongoing, yes, there was the disagreement at the very start over whether to include the cost of the third building. But by the time he was taking questions from reporters at the construction site, the president was saying then that he didn't think it seemed necessary to fire the Fed chair. And as you said, here he's saying that Powell congratulated him on how well things were going, said the country was doing well. And Trump says he took that to mean that maybe Powell is willing to soon lower interest rates. He didn't say Powell said he was there. But you're right. I think a lot of people thought that that yesterday's big show at the Fed was going to make things worse. It was going to escalate things further. The president might look at things that he didn't like and then say maybe this is cause for firing. But clearly it went the opposite direction, and that's what the markets are taking out of that.
Yeah, the dollar comments also were notable to me. I didn't hear the first question, but it seemed like it was something like you concerned about the weaker dollar because the dollar had a really rough first half. It's down 10% for the year. And his response is, I think, something that, investors would expect, which is, yes, we want a strong dollar, but he's not worried because a weaker dollar is actually very helpful when it comes to growth and when it comes to earnings. And that's been the story. I think it's part of why the market's been so enthusiastic and celebratory lately is the weaker dollar does translate into better earnings. And yes, maybe there's some concerns about an unwind of U.S. exceptionalism, but ultimately, we've had enough commentary from pros saying U.S. is still where it's at.
I thought that was a fascinating exchange. It was a very long answer from the president, and he actually took some follow-ups on the dollar as well. He was saying it doesn't sound good, but you make a hell of a lot more money with a weaker dollar. When you have a strong dollar, you can't sell anything. And he was acknowledging that he can't come out and say he wants a weaker dollar. He even said, you see a headline, the president wants a weak dollar. He's saying, no, that's not what I want. A strong dollar always sounds better. But then he went on to talk about all the benefits of a weak dollar. He also talked about the fights that he's had with Japan and China in the first term about when their currency has weakened and talk about China being a currency manipulator back then. So saying, of course, I don't want that. But at the same time, he doesn't hate when dollar, he says, doesn't get weak, but weaker could be a good thing.
Everybody secretly wants a weaker currency, but a stable currency. I think Trump includes.
Yes.
Megan, thank you. Megan Cassella.